And we're live. Good morning, friends, family of the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Today, we're going to talk about high-intensity interval training and how we can implement that in the older adult population. My name is Dustin Jones, home health physical therapist, one of two faculty member in the older adult division. I'm joined with Christina Previtt, who is on the mic every other week. I'm really excited about the course coming up at the beginning of the new year, but I'll talk about that at the end of today's episode. So, high-intensity interval training. We talk about a lot, I feel, in this circle. It's a very fitness-focused circle, at least with ICE. A lot of people do CrossFit. We talk a lot about CrossFit, and high-intensity interval training is one aspect of that type of training that many of you all practice on a daily basis probably and very familiar with. But when we often think about high-intensity interval training, it's usually with a more active or young population. And I want to make the case that older adults, will benefit tremendously, but they may have more to gain from high-intensity interval training than younger individuals. So there's a decent amount of research that's coming out about implementing high-intensity interval training with the older adult population. I want to highlight a couple that were pretty interesting. From out of Florida in 2016 in the issue of experimental gerontology, which I know excites a lot of you all when you see that. There were 51 healthy but sedentary subjects, and they basically split them up. There was a control group, there was a moderate intensity continuous training group, and then there was a high intensity interval training. And what they used was an Airdyne. So the bike with the arms, the all extremity ergometer basically. You could also probably do the same study with a new step that we all see in skilled nursing facilities. But what they did with the high-intensity interval training group, they did 4 by 4 minutes at 90% of a peak heart rate effort. And then the rest periods, they were 3 by 3 minutes. And they did that 4 times a week for 8 weeks. And then the moderate intensity, they just did 32 continuous minutes at 70% of their peak heart rate. And after the 8 weeks, the high-intensity interval training group just crushed it and demonstrated a significant jump in aerobic function, cardiac systolic function, and insulin resistance compared to the other groups. So a pretty substantial difference, even when you use something like an Airdyne bike or probably something like a new step. And then there's also an interesting study that was in Cell Metabolism, the Journal of Cell Metabolism, that looked at the effect of high-intensity interval training in younger individuals and compared that to older adults. And so they just wanted to see, how do these different groups of people respond to relatively the same stimulus? And the older adults had a more significant response to the high-intensity interval training than the young adults. And that's mind-blowing to me because we often don't view older adults as that adaptable. But man, when you take them through some of these higher intensity activities in a very thoughtful manner, very safe manner, man, they respond super well. And it's really encouraging for you as a provider to be able to see such big jumps in some of the functional measures that we'll use, but it's very empowering for the patient to be able to see such a significant change in such a short period of time. So what I want to just talk about today is 3 tips from what I've learned just screwing up with my patients, but having some successes, but then interacting with a lot of you all, a lot of people in the senior rehab project world, but 3 tips that are hopefully going to be helpful for you to implement this stuff into the clinic today. So number 1, this is kind of a overarching principle in the world of the Institute of Clinical Excellence, is we have to be very conscious of irritability. We have to let irritability guide our interventions, especially with high-intensity interval training. So for many of you that are working in the outpatient orthopedic realm, pain is going to be a primary concern for the patient. As compared to me in home health, I do have patients that are in pain, but a lot of my patients are just generally deconditioned. They're kind of in that frail state. They need to get strong and they need to have improved conditioning. So I feel like in my world, I've got more liberty to perform high-intensity interval training. I can do a lot more things without necessarily being too concerned about irritability from the pain standpoint. But you all that are working with people with back pain, with knee pain, what have you, you need to be very conscious of that. So I don't want you to, listen to this podcast and just throw someone in this crazy interval workout. Address their pain, address those patients' goals, but know that you can still work around someone's pain. So just because someone may have, some knee issues that they're coming to see you for, you can still implement some type of conditioning or high intensity interval training. We can adapt, we can scale. So just let irritability, be your guide. Really be very conscious of that. Number 2, older adults are volume sensitive and intensity dependent. So this is something from this lovely book. I think Christina Previtt mentioned that a week or two ago. This is from Dr. Sullivan. He's with the Starting Strength crew, which we're going to have to tag Mark Ripito and let him know that some physical therapists are giving him props, because he's often a critic of what we do. But Dr. Sullivan is an ER physician up in Michigan who has a barbell gym mainly for older adults. But he wrote that book, The Barbell Prescription, which is an awesome read. I highly recommend that you all pick it up. But there, man, I forget which section, but he talks about how older adults are volume sensitive and intensity dependent. And this has definitely rung true in my experience. So when we say volume sensitive, you need to be very cautious of the amount of time that you are, working with your older adults, or the work that they're doing, the amount of reps and the amount of sets. The soreness can be a big issue. How they are able to perform their activities of daily living after your session is a big issue that, we can have a big impact in a negative manner on people's quality of life if we perform a lot of high volume with older adults. So in terms of the interval training, when you look at the research with some of the populations that have a lot of comorbidities, usually you're going to see 15 to 30 seconds of work when they're doing high intensity interval training. So not very long periods of hard work. 15 to 30 seconds is a good place to start, and then you can scale up. You're typically going to see a 1 to 2, 1 to 3 work to rest ratio, which I know for some of you all, especially, if you're, doing CrossFit WODs, that's a lot of rest. But with the older adult, it's probably needed. So, you probably want to start on the low end, 1 to 2, 1 to 3 in terms of a work to rest ratio, and you're going to be, pretty good. Also, you'll see typically the overall volume of the workout's like 10 to 15 minutes, so pretty quick, which I think is a really good thing for older adults. So it doesn't have to be, 40 some minutes, that we'll often see in younger individuals, but 10 to 15 minutes is going to do pretty awesome. Also about 2 to 3 times a week. So you don't have to do this every day. You don't have to do it, 4 days a week, but it's been shown to be super effective 2 to 3 times a week. So, I'm in home health. I know this is very different compared to what the settings that many of you all are in, but when I see, 15 to 30 seconds of work, 1 to 2, 1 to 3 work rest ratio, 10 to 15 minutes overall for interval training, 2 to 3 times a week, this makes it very feasible for us to have that within our physical therapy sessions, or to recommend that someone does it, as a home exercise program. So volume sensitive. They're also intensity dependent. So it needs to be an appropriate intensity for these older adults to respond adequately, or to the most that they're capable of responding. So there's a couple ways, with the study that I mentioned with all extremity ergometer, they did heart rate. With a lot of the patients that we use are probably on some type of medication that's going to alter their response to exercise. So measuring heart rate may not be the best thing. You can do it for sure. A lot of people will do a percentage of a 1 rep max. Clinically, I've never seen that happen. Some of you all may be all-star clinicians that actually measure that, but I have not been in a clinic and actually seen someone perform a 1 rep max and then work off percentages of that. I may have not been in very good clinics. So leave a comment in the section if you actually use that on a daily basis. What I've often seen, and definitely what I've implemented, is using the OmniRes scale. I think Mitch has talked about this in terms of just the subjective report, basically an RPE. OmniRes, it's a 0 to 10 scale. They have pictures of the weightlifter with the barbell struggling. It's pretty funny, but you can just have them point, how hard is this on a 0 to 10 scale, 10 being the hardest thing you've ever done. And when you are wanting to gauge that subjective report, at a minimum, to get an adequate response from an older adult, you need to be in that 5 to 6 range at a minimum. And then you want to work your way up. So the OmniRes there's a decent amount of research showing of its ability to predict percentages of 1 rep max. And a lot of really smart people that I've interacted with have definitely used it as well, and it's been pretty successful with my patients. So the OmniRes is something that we can definitely implement, especially if you're in a busy clinic and you just don't have the time to break out a percentage of a 1 rep max. So the OmniRes is a good option. So let irritability be your guide. Number 2, older adults are volume sensitive and intensity dependent. And then number 3, be a master of scale. This is big in the CrossFit world. We got to, sometimes, people scale the workouts, and that is, pretty appropriate. You have to be able to do that with older adults so you can scale the movement. So just because someone cannot get underneath the barbell and perform, 21 squats and then go run 400 meters doesn't mean that they cannot do high intensity interval training. We have to scale these movements to the person in front of them. So like that study that I mentioned before, you can throw them on an all extremity ergometer, the Aerodyne bike that a lot of clinics have, or the New Step. We can redeem the New Step. I know many of you all remember the New Step, probably from your rotations through the skilled nursing facility, where you just throw the person on there to kill some of the portion of the 75-minute session that you would have with someone so you could catch up on your documentation. We've all seen it, and it hasn't been utilized to the best of its ability, but we can redeem the New Step by performing high-intensity interval training. You can perform, instead of just a regular squat, you can do sit to stands on a box or a table or a seat. You can adjust the height of that seat. There's so many ways that you can scale these movements so people can perform high intensity interval training in a safe manner. You can also scale the resistance, obviously, by the amount of weight that you use, but resistance is really helpful to bump up that intensity. So you can use a barbell, you can use dumbbells. I'm wearing my weight vest right now, so you can get one of these bad boys, which are really helpful with older adults. You have to watch where the skin, the friction points of the shoulders, and right around the sacrum or the low back can be an issue for people. But weighted vests are a great way to load your patients in a safe manner, and they can do lots of different activities. We got the good old kettlebell here. Have some ankle or wrist weights, which can be helpful in certain situations. But you can scale the resistance with different types of resistance. So get creative with that, but just know that the older adults are going to respond really well. If you have adequate intensity, if you're sensitive to the amount of volume that you're taking them through, and if you just really let irritability guide you in the type of exercises that you're going to perform, they can serve your patients really well. So just think about, in your unique setting, with your caseload, with that particular patient that's going to be coming in today, how could you potentially implement some of these into your treatment session, your plan of care, or just think about how to have these types of conversations and make these recommendations, maybe whenever they leave physical therapy. So that's it for high intensity interval training. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any tips with any of this stuff, just leave a comment on the Facebook post associated with this podcast. In terms of ICE announcements, the big one that we want to get far and wide is the courses are going to be jumping up by $100 on January 1st, 2018. So right now they're about $495. They're going to be going up to $595. But if you register for a course before January 1st, 2018, you'll lock in that $495 amount. So go on ptonice.com, check out all the available courses that are going on. I'm going to put a selfless plug. Modern Management of the Older Adult is going to start January 8th, 2018. We're at a good pace to fill this course if things keep going the way they are. So I'll definitely get on that sooner than later. I know I'm super pumped to just really package all this stuff up with Christine and Previtt and present it to you all in a pretty effective manner. So thank you all for listening. High intensity interval training. It's good for your patients. Implement it. And I will talk to you all in a couple weeks. Thanks.